Get in there, the snake's got him. He's not answering.
It was just past 3 p.m. on a sweltering June afternoon in Pinellas County, Florida. The kind of day where even the wind felt tired. Alan Riggs, a retired firefighter, had been mowing his lawn when he heard a loud crash, then what sounded like someone pounding on drywall from the inside. He froze. It came from his neighbor's house, James Boyle, the quiet, reptile-loving man next door who lived alone and barely spoke above a whisper. The man who turned his guest room into a miniature jungle filled with exotic snakes and lizards. Alan knew something wasn't right. He dropped the mower, sprinted across the lawn, and yanked open the side door James always left unlocked. The sound hit him first, a deep, rhythmic thumping, like furniture being dragged across the floor. Only it wasn't. Then he saw it. Inside that dim reptile room, James was on his knees, face red and purple, arms flailing weakly. Wrapped around his torso like a constricting rope from hell was a 17-foot reticulated python tightening its grip by the second. The snake's muscles rippled with each breath it stole from James's lungs. His ribs already cracked, strained under the pressure. Alan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a metal curtain rod leaning against the wall and wedged it between the snake's coils, pressing as hard as he could near its neck. For nearly 2 minutes, he fought the beast's sweat pouring down his face, his own arms trembling with fatigue. And then, the python let go. But by that point, James had collapsed. Before we get into what happened next and how close this man came to death inside his own home, I want to ask you something. Do you believe animals we raise with love can ever truly be tamed? Because this story, it's not just about a snake. It's about trust, blind love, and a man who thought he understood the rules until one afternoon nature reminded him otherwise. If you love real-life stories that shock, move, and stay with you long after they end, don't forget to subscribe to Animal Story. We tell the truth, even when it bites. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and be part of our growing community of animal lovers who know that behind every bond, there's a risk. Now back to James Boyle. You see, to understand how he ended up nearly crushed to death by the same python he raised from a baby, you have to rewind the clock. Not to that terrible June afternoon of mine, but to 10 years earlier when a grieving man bought a shoebox-sized reptile at a roadside expo and decided to give it everything he had left to give. Back then, she was just Lena, a name he gave the moment he held her trembling body in the palm of his hand. He had no idea she'd one day almost take his life. But that is where it all begins. Before the attack, before the hospital visit, before the headlines, James Boyle was just the snake guy in the neighborhood. To most of his neighbors in Pinellas County, Florida, James was quiet, polite, and a little different. Not in a bad way, just in the kind of way where you waved at him from across the street and he nodded back without saying much. Lived alone, kept to himself, drove a rusted red pickup, and always seemed to be carrying boxes marked live feeders from the back of his truck to his house. But those who knew him better knew that James had a soft heart. He was 54 years old, divorced, and had been living alone for nearly a decade since his wife passed unexpectedly from cancer. They never had kids. After she died, the house got too quiet. The walls echoed too much. So James filled the silence with reptiles. It started small, a couple of geckos, then a green iguana he rescued off Craigslist. Then came the snakes. He didn't just collect them, he studied them, built custom enclosures with heated flooring and humidity gauges, fed them carefully regulated diets, kept charts, bought veterinary-grade supplies. His small guest bedroom eventually became a full-blown reptile room with custom lighting, lockable cages, and shelves of care manuals stacked like Bibles. But one animal changed everything. A baby reticulated python he named Lena. James got her from a reptile expo in Tampa. She was just over 2 feet long, slim as a garden hose, coiled nervously in a clear deli cup with air holes punched in the lid. Most people walked right past her, but not James. She looked scared, he once told a local reptile Facebook group. I felt something when I held her, like she needed someone who wouldn't give up on her. From that moment, Lena became his world. He raised her from a hatchling. She shed her skin every few months, and James kept every single one in a labeled Ziploc bag with a date and her length. He charted her growth, fed her frozen thawed rabbits as she got bigger, talked to her while cleaning her cage, played soft jazz when she seemed stressed. At night, he'd sit beside her enclosure and sip coffee, sometimes just watching her move. When she reached 10 feet long, friends and online strangers started warning him. You should never handle her alone, man. Once they hit 12 feet, it's game over if they coil. That's not a pet, that's a wild animal. But James shrugged it off. Lena had never struck at him, never hissed, never tightened too hard when coiling around his arm during feeding. She knew him, trusted him. He told everyone, she's calm because she knows I'm not afraid of her. We're a team. To him, Lena wasn't a threat. She was therapy. She gave him purpose, a routine, and something to care for. In a world that had taken so much from him, she gave back a little warmth, even if it came in the form of cool scales and quiet stares. James didn't just raise a snake, he bonded with one, in a way that most people will never understand. But love, as beautiful as it is, can sometimes blind us to what we don't want to see. And in the case of James and Lena, that blindness nearly cost him everything. Because behind those unblinking golden eyes, something primal was always waiting, something wild. And it was only a matter of time. Over the years, Lena became more than just a reptile in a glass enclosure. She became James Boyle's entire world. People in the neighborhood would sometimes glance toward his garage and catch a glimpse of her through the tinted window. A sleek, patterned body draped across thick branches under the glow of red heat lamps. But it was the way James talked about her that told you everything. He didn't say my snake, he said my girl. When friends dropped by, he introduced Lena like she was a family member. She knows her name, he'd say proudly. She knows my scent. I've held her since she was the length of a shoelace. He wasn't exaggerating. James had spent almost every single day of the last 10 years with Lena. He fed her, cleaned her space, spoke to her, and even played ambient jungle sounds when he thought she seemed sluggish. To outsiders, it looked like obsession, but to James, it was connection. He started uploading short videos to his small YouTube channel, Florida Cold-Blooded. In one clip, Lena rested calmly on his lap while he trimmed a dead scale from her belly. In another, she curled gently around his shoulders while he gave her a treat, a thawed rabbit from gloved hands. People don't get it, James once said in a video. They think snakes are just killers. But if you raise them right, they can be gentle, even affectionate. He believed it, with his whole heart. And for a long time, the world seemed to believe it too. His videos gathered a few thousand views. He received comments from other reptile owners praising his technique and patience. One viewer wrote, "You're living my dream, man. That kind of trust is beautiful." Local kids called him the Python Whisperer. And maybe he was, because Lena really did seem tame, calm during feeding, responsive to his voice, even showing what James swore were signs of recognition. He'd hold up a blue rubber glove and she'd glide toward it, associating it with feeding. He could gently touch her nose without her flinching. No striking, no coiling unless invited. Their bond seemed unbreakable. But here's the thing no one likes to talk about. Snakes don't love. Not the way dogs do. Not even the way cats do. Snakes don't bond. They don't attach emotionally. They recognize patterns, sense temperature, and hunger. Still, James built his life around the belief that Lena was different. He had dreams of turning his little reptile room into a licensed educational center. Maybe start traveling to schools, teach kids about misunderstood animals. He even ordered custom t-shirts, cold-blooded, big-hearted. He envisioned Lena as the perfect ambassador, a living example that wild didn't always mean dangerous. And in all those plans, all that faith, there was never a scenario where she turned on him. Because when you raise something from a baby, when you feed it clean, it talk to it every day for 10 years, you start to forget what it really is. You start to think it owes you something in return. But nature doesn't make deals. And Lena, she wasn't planning anything. She was just growing bigger and hungrier. It started with something small. One afternoon in late spring, James opened Lena's enclosure to move her into her cleaning tub. Normally, she slid out slowly, lifting her head like a cat stretching after a nap. But this time she struck forward. Not a bite, not even close. Just a sudden sharp movement, tongue flicking, head jerking toward his arm. James froze. She didn't follow through, didn't hiss, just stared at him, still as stone. He laughed it off later in a group chat with other reptile keepers. She was probably just startled. Room was a little cooler than usual, but deep down it shook him. Then came the feeding incident. Lena always took her food from tongs. James used thick gloves, never bare hands, and always stood at an angle when presenting prey. He'd done it 100 times. But on that particular Saturday, she launched, snatched the rabbit from the tongs with such force it tore from his grip. Her coils tightened violently around the lifeless meal, snapping bones he could hear from across the room. She didn't let go for 10 minutes. James watched the entire time, eyes wide, silent. That night, he posted a vague status on Facebook. "She's getting strong, real strong." His niece Melissa saw the post and texted him, "Uncle James, please don't handle her alone anymore. She's huge now. You need a second person in the room." He didn't answer. 2 days later, he got a warning letter from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. An inspector had driven by and noticed the windows open during cleaning hours, which according to state law required a second licensed handler on site for any constrictor over 12 feet. James crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. "They don't know her like I do," he muttered to himself. He believed it, deeply. Lena wasn't just another animal to him, she was family. And family doesn't hurt you, right? But things kept piling up. She started pacing more, pushing her nose hard against the glass. One night he found her twisted halfway up the enclosure wall, flexing her body like she was testing for weak spots. He reinforced the locks. She stopped responding to verbal cues during feeding, stared at him longer, followed his movement more slowly, deliberately. Then there was the time she latched onto his boot during cage cleaning. Not hard, not aggressive, just coiled once around his ankle and held it for 10 seconds. James stood still, whispering softly, "Hey now, easy girl, it's just me." She released, but his breathing didn't return to normal for hours. People warned him again. A friend from his reptile form even called. "You gotta stop treating her like a dog, James. She's not loyal, she's just calculating." But he couldn't hear it. He didn't want to. He still believed he had something special. That after all the years, the hours, the careful work, Lena was different. "She's calm around me because she knows me," he told himself. "She trusts me. I trust her." But what James didn't understand was this. Trust is a human idea. And Lena, she was never trying to be human. She was just being what she always was, a snake. And that instinct, it was starting to wake up. June 12, 2013 started like any other day. It was humid the way summer always is in Florida, thick, sticky air that made the windows sweat. James had been up early, drinking his usual black coffee from a chipped Gator mug, scrolling through comments on his latest YouTube video, Feeding Day with Lena, 10 years strong. The video had nearly 3,000 views. One comment stuck with him. "Can't believe she's that calm after all these years." "You've got a gift, man." He smiled. That's what he wanted people to see. The connection, the trust. What they didn't see, what he never posted, were the little signs, the missed meals, the stiffness in her body, the weight of unease that had been growing like mold in the back of his mind. Still, he had work to do. It was cleaning day. The python room was due for a full wipe down, and Lena's enclosure needed fresh water and new bedding. He changed into his thick gloves and denim work shirt, then grabbed a bucket, a spray bottle, and his favorite metal tongs, the ones with the rubber tips, so she wouldn't get startled. There was no second handler, no one else in the house. He unlocked Lena's cage and slid it open halfway like he always did. She lay coiled in the far corner, her body rippling under the heat lamp. Her head was turned away. He spoke softly. "Hey girl, just me. Let's get you cleaned up, all right?" She didn't move. James stepped in, crouched low, and reached to lift her water bowl. That's when it happened, like lightning. Lena spun jaws wide and slammed into his side, not with her teeth, but with the full weight of her upper body. James grunted as the force knocked him sideways. In a blink, her body wrapped around his chest. One coil, then two, then three. He dropped the bowl. Water splashed everywhere. He gasped, trying to suck in air, but nothing came. She was squeezing. Hard. The pain was like being crushed by a car. His ribs groaned under the pressure. He tried to call out, but it came out like a wheeze. His fingers clawed at the floor. He grabbed for her head, but she was already locked in. No anger, no hiss, no growl. Just pure instinct. From the kitchen, his neighbor, Alan, heard the sound, a loud, sharp thud. Then came the desperate banging. The kind of sound you don't forget. He sprinted over, burst through the side door, and found James on the floor of the reptile room, purple-faced eyes bulging, barely conscious. The python was wrapped tight around his torso, her muscles undulating slowly, methodically. Alan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a curtain rod from beside the door and jabbed it between Lena's head and James's ribs. She resisted. He pressed harder. For 90 seconds, that felt like forever. He fought her, pulling, grunting, sweating. And finally, she released. James collapsed, gasping, barely able to speak. The paramedics said later that if Alan had arrived even a minute later, James would have died from respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. 3 ribs were broken, his lungs were bruised, but he was alive. Lena was sealed in her cage, quiet as ever, coiled in the corner, like nothing had happened. James was loaded into the ambulance. He didn't say much, just one line. She didn't mean it. But deep down, part of him knew she did exactly what nature made her to do. And it nearly cost him his life. James Boyle survived. But he wasn't the same man who had walked into that room. 3 broken ribs, bruised lungs, and deep muscle damage kept him in the hospital for over a week. When the doctors finally cleared him to go home, it wasn't really home anymore. Not the way it used to be, because Lena was gone. While James lay unconscious in the ICU, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an emergency inspection of his home. Their report cited multiple violations, failure to have a secondary handler, on-site improper enclosure access procedures, and lack of updated emergency protocols. Within 48 hours, all of James's reptiles were seized. Lena was transported to a licensed exotic animal sanctuary in Central Florida. She was still healthy, still quiet, still coiled calmly in her crate during transport. But for the first time in 10 years, James wasn't there. The local news caught wind of the story. The headlines were brutal. Man crushed by his own pet python. Trust broken by 17 feet of muscle, cold-blooded bond nearly turns fatal. Some called him reckless. Others called him foolish, but many just felt sad. Neighbors left flowers by his front gate. A group of kids taped a handwritten note to his door. "We love you, Mr. Boyle. Please get better, and we miss Lena." His YouTube subscribers flooded the comment section of his last video with prayers and disbelief. This doesn't make sense. She was so gentle. James loved her like a daughter. Why would she do this? But maybe the better question isn't why. Maybe it's this. Did we ever truly know what Lena was capable of? Because love can blur lines. James saw her as more than a snake. He saw her as a companion, a comfort, maybe even a connection to something lost. But Lena didn't see the world that way. She didn't see grief or loneliness or the years of care. She saw warmth, scent, movement, a human body too close, a moment too vulnerable. And instinct did the rest. James doesn't give interviews anymore. He's taken down his YouTube channel, stopped answering messages. Most days he stays inside recovering physically and emotionally. But a neighbor said they recently saw him sitting on the porch sipping coffee, staring out at the tree line in silence. And when they asked if he missed her, he just nodded. She didn't mean it, he said. She was just doing what she was born to do. So now we ask you, can love truly rewrite the instincts of a wild animal? If you raised something from birth, believed it knew you, trusted you, would you ever believe it could hurt you? And if it did, would you blame it? Let us know what you think in the comments. Because this story isn't just about a man and his snake. It's about how far we're willing to go to feel connected, even if it means putting everything we are in the hands of something we'll never fully understand. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you reflect, subscribe to Animal Story for more true, powerful animal encounters. Sometimes love is beautiful, and sometimes love is blind.